Black girl kicked out of dealership. The next day, her father's 5 Rolls-Royces pulled up out front. The glass doors of Atlanta's most exclusive luxury car dealership swung open with a blast of cool, conditioned air. Inside, silence gripped the staff. 5 brand-new Rolls-Royces glided to a halt outside in perfect unison, their midnight black paint gleaming like obsidian under the Georgia sun. Every head turned, every breath caught in the throat. And then, out stepped the man they would all regret underestimating. Marcus Bennett. No one said a word. No one dared. Because standing beside him, eyes forward, head high, was the same girl they had humiliated just 24 hours before. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice smooth but heavy. "I believe my daughter was here yesterday. I'm here to finish what she started." But rewind to the day before, when none of them knew her name. Imani Bennett was used to turning heads. Not because she asked for attention, but because she radiated a quiet kind of confidence that made people either admire her or get deeply uncomfortable. At 17, she had a 4.0 GPA, had built her own drone from scratch, and was days away from winning a scholarship to MIT's summer engineering program. On that bright Friday afternoon, she stepped into Kingsway Motors in a crisp white blouse, jeans, and sneakers. Her long braids were pulled into a neat bun, and a leather-bound notebook was tucked under her arm. She was there with one simple purpose: take a few reference photos of her dad's dream car, a custom Rolls-Royce Ghost, for a surprise digital project she was building as a birthday gift. What she didn't expect was the look of sheer disdain that met her at the front desk. "Can I help you?" said the man without even glancing at her. "I'm just here to look at the Ghost series. I'm not buying today. I'm working on a design project for my dad's birthday." The man, later identified as Blake Jordan, looked up then. His smirk was instant. "You're not buying. Figures," he said. "Look, we don't allow casual loitering. You can check out the models online." "I didn't mean to," she began, but he was already walking around the counter, gesturing toward the exit like she was some trespasser. Another salesman leaned in, whispering something. Blake's face twisted in mock amusement. "What's that? MIT? She looks like she should be hanging outside the mall, not building engines." Imani's face didn't flinch, but her hands tightened around her notebook. "I understand," she said quietly. "Sorry for the misunderstanding." She turned and walked out. What she didn't see, what no one did, was the young employee in the corner discreetly recording the encounter on his phone, eyebrows raised in disbelief. That evening, Imani sat on the floor of her room, the notebook untouched. Her walls, usually covered with sketches of engine systems and car silhouettes, felt like they were closing in. Her mother noticed her silence, but Imani only gave a tired smile and said she was fine. It wasn't until Marcus got home from a late meeting that the truth spilled out. He noticed the notebook still closed, the lack of music, the quiet that didn't belong to his daughter. "Something happen?" he asked. She shook her head. "No," she said. I went somewhere today. It didn't go how I expected." Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't press. He never did. Instead, he sat beside her and said what he always said. "You know you're the brightest thing I ever built, right?" That night, while Imani tried to sleep, Marcus scrolled through his phone. He didn't need to ask where she'd gone. He knew the car she'd been researching. And it didn't take long before someone sent him the video already beginning to circulate online, grainy footage of his daughter being shown the door like a criminal. Marcus watched the clip twice. Then he called his assistant. "I want 5, he said. "Black, custom interiors. Delivered tomorrow morning to Kingsway Motors. I'll meet them there." The next morning, Imani woke to a note on her pillow. "Ride with me. No questions. Wear what makes you feel like a boss." She found her dad waiting beside his matte gray Mercedes Maybach, wearing a three-piece navy suit and calm fury in his eyes. She didn't ask. She just nodded. As they pulled up in front of Kingsway, she saw the 5 Rolls-Royces gliding into formation, each with a driver, each door opening in unison. She looked at her dad in confusion. "Why are we here?" Marcus smiled gently. "To return something they tried to steal from you." Imani stepped out beside him. The employees inside had already gathered at the windows, slack-jawed. Blake, coffee in hand, dropped the cup. A corporate manager, summoned last minute by a panicked regional director, rushed forward with a forced smile. "Sir, welcome to Kingsway Motors. What can we help you with?" Marcus didn't even glance at him. He looked only at Imani. "You lead the way," he said. She hesitated, just for a moment. Then she walked through those same glass doors, head held high. She didn't have to raise her voice. She didn't have to explain herself. Her presence was enough. And beside her, her father stood not as a billionaire, but as a black father who refused to let his daughter be small. As silence wrapped around the showroom, Blake finally muttered, "I didn't know who she was." Marcus turned to him, his tone razor-sharp. "You didn't need to know who she was. You just needed to treat her like she belonged." And just like that, the temperature dropped. Everyone now understood the storm that had just walked through their door. And it was only just beginning. Imani had never known silence like the one that wrapped around the dinner table that night. Her mother, Camille, passed the salad bowl in mechanical motions. Her father sat across from her, knife and fork untouched, as if he were holding on to restraint with every ounce of discipline in his body. She had tried to move on. She had tried not to let it get to her. But that didn't stop the video from gaining over 50,000 views in a matter of hours. It had been shared across student forums, reposted on local community pages, even stitched into a trending TikTok by an activist influencer with the caption, "Still happening in 2025. Imani hadn't said a word to her dad about the dealership, but he already knew, and when Marcus Bennett knew, the world tended to shift without warning. He finally broke the silence. "Tell me what happened. In your words." Imani dropped her gaze to her plate. "It's not a big deal. I went to Kingsway to take photos of the Rolls-Royce Ghost. Wanted to surprise you with a custom 3D render for your birthday. The manager, Blake, told me to leave, called me a loiterer, said I didn't belong. That was it." "That wasn't it," Marcus replied quietly. "They humiliated you, in front of others." "They didn't know who I was," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "And that's the point, right? They assumed." Marcus exhaled, leaning back. "You're right. But assumptions carry weight when you work in places like that, and they need to feel the cost of that weight." Camille spoke up gently. "You're not going to make this into a public war, are you? Imani's got college interviews soon. We don't need drama." "I'm not making anything. I'm responding to something," Marcus said. But Imani was already ahead of them both. "Dad," she said carefully, "I don't want a press statement. I don't want a lawsuit or a boycott." "That's not what this is about." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it about?" She looked him straight in the eye. "It's about reminding people like Blake that the world doesn't belong to them. That we're in it too, and we're not going anywhere." The air in the room shifted, not with rage, with resolve. That night, while Camille turned in early and Imani disappeared into her room, Marcus walked out onto the balcony of their Buckhead estate. The city stretched wide beneath him, its lights blinking like distant possibilities. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Rico," he said when the call connected. "I need 5 ghosts. Midnight black, silver spirit of ecstasy, custom camel interiors. Delivered tomorrow morning, same spot." There was a pause on the other end. "Kingsway?" "Yes." "You want it quiet or loud?" "I want it respectful. But make sure everyone hears it." "Got it." The next morning, long before the sun touched the skyline, Marcus's legal team began discreet checks into Kingsway's ownership structure. They found what they needed within an hour: a partnership tangled in old money, some past discrimination complaints swept under the rug, and a regional manager who had recently settled a quiet EEOC complaint involving another young black employee. Meanwhile, Imani woke up to 3 text messages from classmates who had seen the video and tagged her in it, all offering solidarity. One read, "I've been there too. Thank you for not staying quiet." She was still reading it when her father walked into her room, dressed like a man heading to war in a tailored charcoal suit and no tie. "You said no lawsuits?" "No press. Fine. But we're not staying quiet either." Imani stared at him. "What are you planning?" "I'm not planning anything," he said. "You are." They arrived at Kingsway just before 10. The Royces arrived minutes later, drivers stepping out in perfect sequence. But Marcus didn't move until Imani did. He held her gaze, waiting for her to make the first move. "Whatever you want to do," he said. "You lead." "I'll follow." She swallowed hard, then opened the door. Inside the dealership, chaos had already started. Blake stood behind the glass, arms flailing as he barked at an assistant manager. The receptionist kept glancing nervously out the window. When Imani walked in, silence followed. This time, no one dared ask who she was. Marcus entered behind her, casually removing his sunglasses, revealing eyes that saw everything. Blake looked like he'd seen a ghost. "I believe you know my daughter," Marcus said, tone low but unmistakably sharp. The dealership's regional VP, a thin man named Howard Mason, who had just flown in that morning, stepped forward in a panic. "Mr. Bennett, this is a misunderstanding, I assure you. We had no idea." "That's the problem," Imani cut in, her voice calm. "You never care to find out who someone is until it's too late." There was no shouting. No threats. Only a truth spoken clearly enough to rattle glass. Imani turned to the other staff, some of whom looked down in shame, others frozen. "My name is Imani Bennett. I'm 17, and yesterday I was told I didn't belong here." She paused. "I just wanted to prove that I did." Blake tried to recover. "Miss Bennett, I truly apologize if anything I said came off as offensive. I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing your prejudice," she replied. And with that, she turned and walked toward the ghost display model that had once been off limits. She took a single photo of it on her phone, then walked back out to her father's side. The show was over, but the consequences had just begun. The dealership was still buzzing with stunned silence when Marcus and Imani walked out. Cameras from onlookers captured every second as the fleet of Royces idled curbside, symbols of wealth and status, yes, but also of a lesson about to be delivered in full. Imani didn't smile, didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She simply stood tall. Inside, the staff scrambled. Howard Mason's face was flushed as he barked into his Bluetooth headset, desperately trying to get someone from corporate legal on the line. Blake Jordan, pale as a ghost himself, was pacing by the window, occasionally peeking outside, trying to assess how much damage this moment had done to his career. It hadn't yet dawned on him that the real fallout hadn't even started. What none of them knew was that Marcus had already instructed his PR team to say nothing. No interviews. No press conferences. The story, he knew, would spread better through whispers, through conversations, through viral disbelief. He didn't need a headline. He needed a reckoning. That night, the video exploded. The same employee who had recorded Imani's mistreatment now posted footage of her return, walking back in with 5 Rolls-Royces flanking her, and a father who looked like he'd just walked out of a GQ cover shoot and into a courtroom. The post read, "Yesterday they said she didn't belong. Today she came back with receipts and a reminder." Within hours, local influencers reposted it. By dawn, Black Twitter had found the story. The hashtag started trending. Imani Bennett. Luxury with dignity. Respect our daughters. But as the world reacted with applause and outrage, something else happened. Something Imani hadn't expected. Messages began pouring in, hundreds of them, young black girls from Atlanta to Oakland. Parents, teachers, even professionals from the automotive world. They weren't all angry, most were inspired. "My daughter watched your video. She asked me, 'Can I be like her one day?' Thank you. My dad was turned away from a dealership just like this in the 80s. He cried watching you stand tall. You gave us all a voice today." Imani sat on her bedroom floor, scrolling through message after message, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. Camille entered quietly, carrying a cup of tea. "You okay?" Imani just nodded, unable to speak. She finally handed her mother the phone. "I didn't want this to go viral," she whispered. "I just wanted to take some pictures. I didn't mean for it to be this." Camille sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You didn't ask for this moment, but you were made for it." Meanwhile, inside Kingsway Motors, Blake was summoned to an emergency meeting in the conference room. The regional director had flown in overnight. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was strategic. "Blake," he said, folding his arms, "I need to know exactly what happened, and I need your version to match what's about to go under legal review." Blake squirmed. I didn't know who she was. I thought she was just some kid." "You mean a black kid?" "I didn't mean it like that." "You never do." The director tossed a folder across the table. "We pulled surveillance. We pulled audio. We pulled every customer complaint you've had in the last 12 months. Guess what they all have in common?" Blake said nothing. The director leaned in, eyes cold. "You're not being fired because of Marcus Bennett. You're being fired because you forgot the first rule of this business. Perception is everything. You didn't just make us look bad, you made us look expendable." And just like that, Blake's 2-decade career unraveled. But for Marcus and Imani, the story wasn't about vengeance. It was about vindication. That morning, as they sat together in the family library, Marcus pulled up a blueprint on his tablet. "I've been thinking," he said. "What if we did more than just prove a point?" Imani looked up. "Like what?" "A new scholarship for girls in automotive engineering. Black girls, brown girls, any young woman who's been told she doesn't belong in places like showrooms or boardrooms." Imani's eyes lit up. "You'd help me build that?" "No," Marcus replied. "You'd lead it. I'd follow." They stared at each other in silence. Something deeper passed between them, something bigger than revenge or even justice. Legacy. But just as Imani began drafting the pitch, something unexpected happened. A notification popped up from her email. Subject: Kingsway Motors, formal apology invitation. She hesitated before clicking. The message was from the newly appointed manager, a woman named Denise Carter. It was professional, thoughtful, acknowledging the wrong. offering not just an apology, but an invitation for Imani to consult on a new Youth in Design initiative the dealership was launching. Camille peeked over her shoulder. "You gonna reply?" Imani smirked. "Oh, I'll reply, but not the way they expect." And just like that, Imani Bennett took her first step into something even bigger than her dream car. She was about to redesign the entire narrative. The boardroom at Bennett Enterprises was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that signaled something important was about to begin. Imani sat at the long glass table across from her father, a digital projector glowing behind her. She wore a sharp black blazer, her curls tied up, her expression focused but alive with energy. "So," Marcus said, folding his hands, "let's see what you've built." Imani tapped a button. The screen lit up with a title slide, "The Drive Forward Initiative, Engineering Equity for the Next Generation." She stood and began to speak. Her voice was clear, steady, and miles away from the girl who had once been shoved out of a showroom. "I want to create a program that does more than respond to what happened at Kingsway," she said. "This will partner with engineering departments, high schools, and design firms to give girls, especially girls of color, access to tools, mentorship, and a real future in automotive design and leadership." Behind her, slides flipped to data. Underrepresentation in STEM, dropout rates, case studies. "I don't want this to be charity," she continued. "I want it to be investment. We're not giving opportunities. We're creating them. From the ground up." Marcus watched without interrupting. Camille sat nearby, lips pressed, holding back a proud smile. "And here's the twist," Imani said, her tone sharpening with purpose. "Kingsway will help fund it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "They offered a partnership, public apology, a corporate donation, and a paid consulting role. I say we take it. Not because we need it, but because it forces them to be part of the solution." The room was still. Then Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You're not asking to burn down the dealership," he said. "You're turning it into a launch pad." "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want results." That afternoon, Imani walked into Kingsway again. Not as a customer, not even as a critic. This time, she was there as a consultant. Denise Carter, the newly appointed manager, greeted her at the door. A poised black woman in her 40s, Denise had joined Kingsway only a month before the incident. She had been away during the first encounter, but she knew exactly what had happened. "Imani," she said warmly, extending a hand, "I'm grateful you're giving us a second chance." "I'm not here to make anyone feel better," Imani replied, shaking her hand firmly. "I'm here to make sure no one like me is ever treated like that again." Denise nodded, her smile not fading. "That's why we wanted you." They walked the showroom floor together. It was more subdued now. No stares. No whispered judgment. Imani could feel the tension under the surface, some staff watching, unsure how to react. She didn't care. She wasn't there to make them comfortable. At the conference table, Denise laid out the preliminary plan. Scholarships, internships, rotating mentorship programs with local schools. It was a good start. But then came the moment Imani didn't expect. "We also reviewed internal practices," Denise said, sliding a file toward her. "You should see this." Inside were HR reports dating back 5 years. Complaints, terminated files, even a private memo from the previous manager, Blake Jordan, flagging undesirable clientele profiles, language that made Imani's stomach churn. "I had no idea," Denise said quietly, "but I promise you it ends now." Imani looked at her, unsure what to say. The woman sitting across from her wasn't Blake. She wasn't trying to save face. She was trying to fix the damage. A moment of silence passed. Then Imani asked, Why'd you take this job? Denise hesitated, then smiled. Because I was once a girl like you, except when I walked into a dealership, nobody came back the next day. Nobody had my back. Imani blinked hard, her throat suddenly tight. That evening, back home, Imani sat in her room scrolling through her inbox. Another flood of messages. Another wave of stories from people who had never felt seen until now. But one message stood out. It was from Blake Jordan. Subject: I owe you an apology. She hovered over it. Her finger hesitated. Then she clicked. Inside was a single paragraph. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do owe you a sincere apology. I watched your speech. I saw the initiative. I realized how deeply I misjudged you, not because of who you were, but because of who I am. I was wrong, and you were more than right. You were brave. Imani stared at the screen. She didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she opened her notes app, scrolled down to the heading she'd typed earlier that week. Things that matter. And under it she wrote, not whether they apologize, but whether we keep going. Then she closed her laptop and whispered into the night air, I'm just getting started. The moment the 5 Rolls-Royces pulled up in front of Kingsway Luxury Motors, the energy in the dealership shifted like a thunderclap. It wasn't just the gleam of the deep black Phantom or the imposing stance of the Wraith that caught everyone's attention. It was the symbolism. Each one parked perfectly, door to door, their engines falling silent in a synchronized hum that turned heads from across the boulevard. Inside, the staff froze mid-conversation. Every salesperson craned their necks toward the windows. Phones came out, hands trembled slightly, and someone muttered, Is that? Imani stepped out of the middle car wearing a tailored navy jumpsuit and crisp white sneakers. Her hair was in a high puff, and she wore no makeup except for a bold red lip. She didn't walk like someone returning to the scene of humiliation. She walked like someone who now owned it. And then Marcus Bennett stepped out behind her. For the first few seconds, no one moved. But then recognition swept through the showroom. Murmurs grew into hushed exclamations. Marcus Bennett, billionaire founder of Bennett Enterprises, owner of 2 aerospace companies, a racing team, and now, apparently, the very narrative that had humiliated his daughter only 24 hours earlier. The manager on duty that day, Nick Lawton, scrambled to adjust his tie and rushed forward. Mr. Bennett, he stammered. We had no idea you were... Marcus didn't even glance at him. His hand rested gently on Imani's shoulder as they walked past, straight through the showroom, toward the same spot where she'd been escorted out yesterday. The same spot where she had once stood invisible. Imani's voice rang out first, calm but commanding. Funny how different it feels when you walk in with power. The entire staff turned toward her. She glanced at Denise Carter, the newly appointed general manager who had only arrived that morning, still reviewing reports and barely aware of what storm she'd inherited. Denise, Imani said, locking eyes. I hope you're ready. This isn't a spectacle. It's a reckoning. Denise nodded, professional and composed. I expected nothing less. Nick stepped forward again, still trying to salvage something. Mr. Bennett, I want to sincerely apologize for what happened to your daughter. That employee has been terminated. But Marcus finally turned to him. You didn't terminate that employee because it was the right thing to do. You terminated them because the internet caught you. You don't get points for damage control. Nick swallowed hard. Imani opened the presentation on her iPad, connecting it to the large screen in the conference room. The Drive Forward initiative lit up in bright, bold colors. She looked around the room at the collection of stunned and uneasy faces. I'm here to present you with a choice, she said. You can publicly endorse this initiative and commit to institutional change, or you can continue pretending that this was just a mistake and not a pattern. But let me be very clear. Your name is already in the headlines. What comes next is your decision. Silence. One of the senior sales executives, a middle-aged white man named Bryce, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. With all due respect, he said, we're a dealership, not a social reform group. We sell cars. Imani turned slowly. You don't just sell cars, she said. You sell status. You sell identity. And when you decided who didn't belong here yesterday, you didn't just reject me. You rejected every person who doesn't look like your ideal customer. That's not just bad business. That's systemic discrimination. Bryce opened his mouth, but Marcus stepped in. She's being polite, Marcus said coolly. If it were up to me, I'd buy this entire dealership just to shut it down. But my daughter believes in fixing things. So you're lucky I listened to her. The room froze again. It was clear now this wasn't a symbolic gesture. This was power walking into a room and choosing not to crush it. Yet, Denise cleared her throat and addressed the team. Let's stop pretending we're victims of a PR crisis, she said. Let's start acting like we're part of the solution. We've made mistakes. Some of them we inherited. Some we participated in. Either way, now we fix it. She turned to Imani. I want you to know, she said, your voice didn't just change the direction of this company. It made us question what we stand for. I'll personally ensure this initiative is funded and implemented. Imani studied her carefully, then nodded. I'll hold you to that. After the meeting, as the Bennetts walked out to the cars, a small crowd had gathered outside. Employees, community members, people who had followed the story online and showed up in quiet solidarity. A teenage girl in a school uniform approached Imani shyly. Miss Bennett, she said, holding out a hand-painted sign. Thank you for not staying silent. Imani smiled, took the sign, and hugged the girl gently. This is for all of us, she whispered. That night, social media exploded again, not with outrage, but with inspiration. Clips of Imani speaking, shots of the 5 luxury cars, quotes from the boardroom. The Drive Forward initiative trended for 12 hours straight, but Imani didn't care about the buzz. Back home, sitting on the floor of her bedroom, she opened her notebook and scribbled one line. You don't have to burn it all down. Sometimes, you just need to walk in and change the locks. She closed the notebook, smiled, and let herself breathe for the first time in days. Imani woke up to find her name trending again, but this time, it wasn't just about her father or the Royces. This time, it was about her. Overnight, someone had leaked the full footage from the dealership's security cameras, showing in detail the way she had been ignored, followed, and finally escorted out, despite doing nothing wrong. The video was raw, unedited, real. And it struck a nerve. News outlets picked it up. Online forums lit up. Influencers reposted it with hashtags like, This is why, and not just one story. And in the middle of it all, Imani's face, calm, composed, confused, became a quiet symbol of everything that needed to change. By noon, a new twist emerged. A former employee of Kingsway Luxury Motors came forward anonymously to a local journalist, revealing that this wasn't the first time the dealership had faced similar complaints. We were told to keep certain clients comfortable, the message read, which basically meant make sure they weren't around people who looked like her. The dealership scrambled to respond. A press release was rushed out, filled with corporate language and vague promises. But the damage was already spreading faster than they could manage. And what had started as a PR mess was becoming something far more dangerous, an awakening. Imani had no intention of being just another headline. That afternoon, she met with her father in the sleek glass conference room of Bennett Enterprises. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching his daughter pace as she outlined a bold idea. "We've got all this attention," she said, "but if it fades tomorrow, then what's the point?" I don't want just another story that people forget. I want real, sustainable impact. Marcus tilted his head. "You're not thinking small. I'm thinking necessary." Her plan: launch a national initiative focused on youth empowerment in business spaces traditionally closed off to people of color. Car sales, real estate, high finance. The name? Access. It would be more than mentorship. It would place young people inside these industries and force companies to rethink who they trained, hired, and promoted. Marcus smiled. "And you want to make this your full-time thing?" Imani met his gaze, unwavering. "I want to turn what happened to me into something that helps others. I'm not going to waste this moment." He stood up, walked to the window, and stared out over the city. "Then let's give it teeth. You'll need a team. Funding, legal backing, protection too. This is going to ruffle some feathers." "I'm ready for that." "You say that now," he said with a low chuckle, turning back. "But just wait until the old boys clubs come after you. They'll call you everything from ungrateful to dangerous." "Let them," she said. "They'll just prove my point." Just as the mood settled into focus, Marcus's assistant tapped lightly on the glass door. "There's something you both need to see." She led them to the media room, where a new video had just surfaced, this time from a hidden phone recording made during an internal meeting at Kingsway Motors. The voices were unmistakable. Senior staff mocking the situation, minimizing the incident, even referring to Imani and her father with coded language laced in arrogance and contempt. "She got what she came for," one man said. "A viral video and a bunch of sympathy clicks." Another laughed. "They'll move on to the next fake outrage in a week. We'll survive." Imani stood frozen. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Marcus's jaw clenched. "So that's how they really feel." A moment passed before Imani whispered, "We're not just pushing reform anymore. We're exposing rot." That night, Imani sat at her desk, staring at the Access logo she'd sketched earlier. Her phone buzzed nonstop with calls from journalists, activists, and even celebrities asking to help. But she ignored them all for a moment to read one quiet DM from a girl in Tulsa. "I saw what they did to you. They did the same to my brother last year. He didn't have 5 Royces show up. He had no one. Thank you for making noise." Imani closed her eyes. That message hit harder than any headline. Because this wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about building something stronger than a moment. Something that could last. When she finally opened her eyes, she typed back a simple reply. "You're not invisible. And you're not alone." She hit send. And the movement began. The morning sun rose over Atlanta like nothing had happened. But inside the sleek boardroom of Kingsway Luxury Motors, the tension was electric. The dealership's CEO, Greg Halston, stood at the head of the table, face tight, jaw set, flanked by lawyers and exhausted PR execs. The leaked video from their internal meeting had gone viral overnight, and the backlash was scorching. "Shut it down," Greg snapped. "Kill comments, disable tags, and get our lawyers to draft a blanket statement. No admission of guilt." "But, sir," said his head of PR, nervously scrolling through her tablet, "the footage from the security cameras and the leaked audio are now being used in multiple legal filings. There's talk of a class action. And worse, Bennett Enterprises just announced they're backing a lawsuit." Greg's eyes narrowed. "A lawsuit? From who?" "That little girl?" "Imani Bennett," she corrected softly. "And it's not just her. She's not asking for compensation. She's building a civil rights action. With her father's resources, they're citing systematic discrimination. This is way bigger than one incident now. Greg exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping the polished mahogany. She's making it personal. At that same moment across town, Imani was sitting in her father's office, her phone blowing up with calls from journalists, lawyers, and city officials. But her attention was on her laptop screen, where she was editing the keynote speech she'd just been invited to deliver at the National Equity in Business Summit. "You nervous?" Marcus asked, leaning against the doorway with a quiet smile. "Not nervous," Imani said, adjusting the wording of a sentence. "Just focused." Marcus stepped inside, laying a fresh printout on the desk. "This just came in." Kingsway's attorney filed an emergency request to settle privately. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just money. Imani stared at the page for a beat, then picked it up and tore it in two. "I'm not here for a check," she said. "I'm here for change." Later that day, the Access Initiative held its first press conference. Dozens of cameras flashed as Imani stood behind the podium in a crisp navy suit, her voice steady but full of fire. "This isn't about me walking into a dealership and getting thrown out," she said, pausing to let the crowd settle. "It's about the thousands of young black men and women who walk into rooms every day and are told, silently or loudly, that they don't belong." Her father stood in the wings, arms folded, pride radiating off him. Imani continued. "We're done knocking politely on doors that were never meant to open for us. We're building our own, and we're making sure they stay open for the people coming behind us." Applause thundered through the room. But backstage, something unexpected was happening. Tiffany Malone, one of the sales reps from Kingsway who had stayed quiet during the incident, was watching the live stream from her office break room. Tears welled up in her eyes as Imani spoke. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out mid-shift. An hour later, she was in the Bennett Enterprises lobby. "I was there," she said to the receptionist. "I saw what happened. I didn't say anything, but I want to now." That single moment cracked the silence that had protected Kingsway for so long. Over the next 48 hours, former employees came forward. 3 past clients shared similar stories. And a major automotive blog published an investigative report detailing years of racial profiling within the company's sales process, complete with data, interviews, and receipts. By the end of the week, Greg Halston was forced to resign. The next morning, the news broke. Kingsway Luxury Motors was under federal investigation for discriminatory practices and consumer fraud. But even as the victory began to feel real, Imani stayed grounded. One night, she stood alone on the balcony of her apartment, the city lights stretching endlessly below. She thought of that first day, the humiliation, the disbelief, and how easily it could have ended there if she had walked away like so many others were told to. Marcus joined her silently, handing her a glass of ginger tea. "You did something they never expected," he said. "Which part?" "You didn't just stand up for yourself," he said. "You made it impossible for them to ignore everyone else." Imani looked out at the skyline, her voice soft but certain. "This isn't over," she said, "but it's a start." And in that quiet moment, the real weight of what she'd begun finally settled in. She wasn't just someone who'd been wronged. She had become someone who refused to let anyone else be. The front page of the Atlanta Herald the next morning was impossible to ignore. "Dealership scandal crumbles under pressure. Bennett family changes the game." The photo just beneath it showed 5 polished Rolls-Royces parked in front of Kingsway Luxury Motors, not as a display of wealth, but as a message. Inside one of them, Imani sat beside her father, watching as dozens of community leaders and young activists gathered on the sidewalk, holding signs that read, "Access, not apologies, and dignity can't be bought." The movement had taken on a life of its own. "You ready?" Marcus asked her. "Been ready," Imani replied, her eyes locked on the dealership doors. They stepped out into the crisp air. Flashbulbs exploded from every angle, but Imani didn't flinch. This was no longer about vengeance. It was about visibility, about confronting a system that had gone unchecked for too long. Inside, Kingsway had been gutted. Half the showroom was empty. The staff was reduced to a skeleton crew. Tiffany Malone, now leading the newly formed Internal Reform Committee, waited at the door to welcome Imani and her father. "We're not just fixing PR," Tiffany said. "We're rebuilding the culture, starting today." In a press conference streamed across the country, Kingsway publicly apologized, but Imani didn't smile. She didn't offer a handshake or a forgiving nod. Instead, she turned to the podium and delivered a speech that would later be quoted in classrooms and boardrooms alike. "Change doesn't start with a press release," she began. "It starts when the people you ignore realize they have a voice. It starts when one no becomes a revolution." She paused, her voice unwavering. "I came in here as a customer. I was treated like a problem. Today, I return not for revenge, but to ensure that the next black girl who walks through these doors is treated like the opportunity she is, not a threat to be dismissed." Thunderous applause filled the space. Yet outside that building, more change was already stirring. The Access Foundation, founded by Imani, launched an equity fund for young black entrepreneurs. She declined speaking fees, using the money to fund internship pipelines for students across the country. Her story reached not just major networks, but smaller community newspapers, youth centers, and classrooms in places where hope felt like a rare currency. But the real twist came weeks later, when a viral video circulated from a completely different dealership across the country in Los Angeles. A young black boy named Amir had walked into a showroom holding a copy of Forbes, the issue with Imani on the cover. When a sales manager asked, "You here to sell candy?" Amir looked him in the eye and said, "No. I'm here to buy my mom a car, and I want to test drive the same one she was kicked out of." The ripple effect was undeniable. One girl's humiliation had sparked a movement. One voice had ignited thousands, and through it all, Imani never stopped being exactly who she was: fearless, strategic, and full of heart. Back in Atlanta, she sat at a school auditorium, quietly watching as a line of fifth graders presented their business ideas. Her name had become a symbol, but today she was just Imani again, clapping for each young dreamer like their idea was the next big thing. Marcus leaned in from the side. "Feels full circle, doesn't it?" Imani smiled. "No, this is just the beginning." And as the lights dimmed, her words echoed through every corner of that room, every comment section online, every whispered conversation in places that used to feel unreachable. Because this wasn't just about cars. It was about value, it was about power, and it was about refusing to be silenced, even when the world tries to shut the door in your face. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own worth, we invite you to support our channel by hitting like, subscribing, and sharing this story. Let's amplify voices like Imani's. Let's make sure every young person knows the door might be closed now, but it won't stay shut forever. Not if we keep pushing together. Thank you for watching. And remember, justice doesn't knock. It enters with purpose.